I'm John, so I'm here from University of York too, and also representing something called CoSTAR LiveLAB, which will give you a bit of marketing spiel about after Sarah's talk also. But now it's my pleasure to introduce Sarah, who's Director of Digital Development at the Royal Shakespeare Company. So Sarah's got an impressive track record of experience in the space where performance art and technology comes together. I've got some accolades which I stole off your LinkedIn page earlier today. So just to give you a bit of a picture before Sarah talks. So I'm sure you'll all know RSC's Dream Online, which Sarah was spearheading from the perspective of the Royal Shakespeare Company, but also she's won awards for her work on the RSC's Tempest with Intel and the Imaginarium. She was listed in the 100 most influential people in gaming technology by Guardian Cultural Professionals, and she's also doing tons of advocacy, mentoring, and policy work, for example, as a champion for the creative industries for the Policy and Evidence Centre. So I don't think there's anyone that we could ask to be better qualified to talk about the topic of the future of live performances and how that might relate to AI. So without no further ado, I'll hand you over to Sarah. And if you want, I'll swap the laptop as well.
Yeah, let's swap the laptop. Hello.
Probably need your slides.
We're swapping laptops. Whenever we do talks about the future of theatre, usually a technology problem happens. I was doing a talk one year to some very sceptical audiences, and my computer started to reset factory settings. So I've always approached talks now in a real comfortableness around technology and analogue. But what I wanted to do was start by saying that no one person makes a piece of theatre, and that's a glorious thing. And the first thing me and John are doing, I'm going to lift the lights up a little bit. And the reason why I'm lifting the lights up a little bit is I want us to all see each other, and I want also to welcome everyone that's here online and at home. You're just as important by being where you are and where you're at and being here, because we're co-present together in a moment. And liveness has an element of jeopardy to it. I may lose my voice today after an hour of speaking. I'm going to give it a go with lots of strepsils. But my point is, in this moment, we're all present together, and we kind of signed a contract with each other that we're here. And I would like you to think about this talk and come to this talk by being someone that could or is part of making a piece of theatre. Whether you're the audience member, whether you're a lighting designer, whether you're a director, whether you're a writer, whether you're a critic, or whether you're someone who's super skeptical, you're part of that process. And it's one of the few art forms that we have where technologies such as AI make it very difficult for you just to come up with a system or a program or an algorithm that gives you an output of that theatre. Because there's so many parts in that experience that are based on us as people, that are based on the mistakes, that are based on the bits in between, that are based on the parts of your imagination. And we need an audience every time we have a live performance. And we need to know that we're experiencing it in real time together. We don't have post-production in our toolkit currently. We're constantly in the present. So the reason why it's really important everyone at home feels part of this is because I'm going to look back over the last decade of what we've done at the RSC to start seeing the emergent patterns for us to think about the future. We don't just innovate from nowhere. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And in Shakespeare's world, that's 400 years worth of innovators, Imagineers, people that were putting things out in the world that had something to say, that had a social and political context as well. Nothing is without that as a context. And as if we look at technology now, actually, I was sitting with this talk. I was like, what am I going to say? What have we got to say about the future and AI and all of these technologies? I feel less certain in this moment than perhaps I did 10 years ago. What does that mean? What world are we in right now? And how do we think about what future we hold, but what love letter would we want to give a next generation when we are probably in the only age where we will have a generation that has lived without the internet and grown up without the internet and we have an entire generation that has known nothing but. And how do we get those generations to talk to each other? How do we get that interconnectivity? And I still come back to theatre with its convening power, with its sense of possibility, and its absolute disregard for technology at some point, where you can sit in a room with someone like this, or you can be at home in your pants, having a cup of tea together. We don't know. I hope you are having it all set up nice at home. But it has a disregard for everything around it, and we can be present together. So all I ask from you today is to think about your role in this, whether you are the person that is like, I'm really not sure about this tech, and I have things to think about and say, or you're person that's driving something forward, or you're the maker, but ultimately we're all the audience. And in that, just to give another context, is that any artist that puts anything out in the world is a gift. And from the moment they've thought about it in their imagination, it's had to compromise, whether that's how they make it in the design of it, how they had to bring other people in. There is a process that an artist goes through to make something happen, to put it out in the world. And whenever they put it out, that is a gift. Because whatever you think about it, whatever has been put out there, the idea that that artist has transformed something and someone moves away from this moment transformed is why people do what they do and why people make theatre and why they come together. So thank you. Let's put the lights back down. Everyone can chill now. We're not doing any audience participation. But it was nice to see your faces for a minute and just to get a sense of that. So when we think about the future, it's actually a really hard term, future, because it means nothing. Yet it's supposed to mean something. And what I mean by that, it's a really easy thing to go, yeah, in the future there'll be this. The sort of science fiction element of it means that you can imagine worlds that don't quite exist yet. And sometimes that means that you don't have the responsibility of it. When we look at how Shakespeare has innovated over the past 400 years, and those plays and those texts, we've seen us constantly be reinterpreting characters and humans' power struggles. But if we see how those plays have developed, it's the art forms and looking at, like, for example, the 20th century, where film came into play and those plays were put into film. And now we're seeing immersive technology. We're seeing those plays in a much more connected, immersed way. But technology also can make us feel really far away and also very together at the same time. And so I wanted to start back in 2013 when we started at the Royal Shakespeare Company, because in that moment we were celebrating the World Shakespeare Festival. And that was the moment where we started to really connect with technology companies and recognize the power that technology companies have now, alongside government, alongside big political players. Technology companies have a seat at the table socially now in ways that have never happened before. If you look at Google, Meta, all of those companies are so pervasive in our lives and are driving how we use technology. We actually reached out to Google to go, what would theatre look like on the internet today? And what we did was we looked at Midsummer Night's Dream, and we created a play that was performed in real time. The play was performed over 3 days and cut into scenes of the play, when naturally the play is only 3 hours, but we cut it into the moments of real time in the play and how long the play took. But in between that, we created layers of social media. And that social media was telling you what was going on in the world of the play, a bit like a party, and you haven't been invited to it, but you know exactly what happened through everyone's social media screens. And that's how we looked at it. And I realized in the first beat, one of the patterns that I started seeing in our work is that convergence of a live world, present as we are, and also a virtual world, present if you're at home. And that being such a big shift for us in terms of theatre and the convening power of that. And also to start to think about what rituals change when you're in a theatre together, and then what rituals do you need if you're experiencing something far away. Dream will come up a lot it's the play that you can play with in this. But back in 2013, the internet was the emergence of Facebook, and in particular, this was Google Plus, which doesn't exist anymore as far as I'm aware. But in the play, we reached 30 million people online. And it was a statistic that, like, even the company didn't really accept, because it wasn't 30 million people like this. And it was interesting to think about the potential reach you can have. And how we reached 30 million people wasn't one piece of 3-hour performance of Shakespeare. It was fractured forms of narrative, over 3,000 pieces of content. And it's also thinking about narrative and content much more episodically, or short pieces of content that can map and knit together to make a larger linear narrative. And again, back in 2013, we're thinking about those things. And in terms of AI, there were definitely algorithms pointing people to that content. Were we thinking about that? Was that technology so pervasive in our life? Not in the way it is now. And just to also think about this technology, such as AI, has been with us for a particularly long amount of time, but now it's disrupting our world and thinking of socially impacting on jobs and all of that type of stuff. In that time, it was behind the scenes. It wasn't so, we weren't so alert to it, but we were finding this technology useful in finding new audiences. So one of the themes I want to think about today is, when technology is useful to us, we accept it. When technology disrupts us, we're challenged by it. But what are the social constructs for us thinking about that? What lens are we looking at? Are we looking at it through a white Western lens? Are we looking at it through a diverse enough range of lenses? When it affects us is the moment where we find that technology challenging. How do we create an ethical framework that allows us to think about that technology in the context of others, in the context of different political scenarios? And also, when do we think about obsolescence? When do we think that actually that time is done for that technology, that way of working? I remember reading newspaper articles from Victorian times saying, you don't need a person that lights the lamps in London with the gas lamp. We've got all of that automated now. And that's like hundreds of years old, but that disruption affected someone's life, their livelihood, all of those aspects of it's not a new thing to think about. But I think the impact of AI in particular is that we've not seen a technology or an ethos around technology that has really come up against not just innovation in terms of faster, more efficient, better. What these technologies are disrupting is creativity and those different mindsets of what being human is, and the challenges around that, and the ethical discussion around taking it out from just AI, but really deconstructing the disruption and what the usefulness is, but the purposefulness is, and who is making the decision. So actually, when I reflect back and why I think I'm less confident about what the future is, in this moment, I hope by the end of the talk, I'll be more confident. But I suppose what I'm saying is that we had a real, that's a great ringtone, by the way. We had a real naivety, I think, about some of these technologies. We had seen disruption, but in the past 10 years, we are seeing the consequences of some of that disruption way more, particularly in the world that we live in. So it was a big preamble. And now I'm going to play you a shiny video to give you a sense of what that project was like.
If thou lov'dst me then, steal forth thy father's house tomorrow night, and in the wood, a league without the town, there shall I stay for thee.
I will go tell him of fair Hermia's flight. Then to the wood he will tomorrow night pursue her.
I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows. And where the snake throws her enamelled skin, weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in.
'We shadows have offended. Think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear.
So good night unto you all. Give me your hands, if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.
million people. That was a statistic that I was like, that's interesting. Yet we have this collection, beautiful you saw in the video, people coming together at midnight watching a show. There were things that happened in that show that technology couldn't touch. Greg timed the play. We started the forest scenes at 2:30 in the morning in the Ashcroft Room, which is a rehearsal space in the Royal Shakespeare Company where you can see where Shakespeare's born and Shakespeare died. And it's a really, really beautiful place that only could create that. And basically the scenes played out from 2:30 in the morning. And I tell no lies here, the dawn chorus of birds started it at pretty much the right moment in the play, real birds. And it's, again, thinking about how you connect 30 million people, and yet you're having those layers of intimacy in live performance. And I think that one thing that it made me think about is how do you keep that convergence happening, and how do you give a special experience to someone who can't be there? And then what are the moments of liveness that can only be created in that moment in time, that ephemeral nature of that. And that led us to The Tempest in 2016, which maybe some of you here might know about a bit more, looking at bringing those technologies into our stages and onto our stages, but now also looking at a generation of artists that don't just identify as theatre practitioners, that identify as gamers, that identify as visual effects of film and cinema and television all converging. And one of the things that we're seeing in the future of performance is that we are a generation of polymaths. We are a generation who are adapting to different platforms, using different technologies, why would you work in theatre? And some of the wanting to work in theatre is the rough magic, the serendipitousness of it, and connecting ways that you can adapt character that you wouldn't necessarily adapt in a film. The pipelines are very different. But what we're seeing is that from a creative standpoint, the alchemy of connecting those technologies means that something new comes through that. I'm going to show you a video of The Tempest, but not dwell on it too much, because I think this is one of the performances that we've talked about a lot over the years. But we were using technology that was originated in healthcare, that went into the film industry and is still used, but it's not quite adapted or stayed in the theatre environment. And one of those reasons is the technologies are still prohibitively expensive. And actually, when we look at the adaptation of technologies into that long-standing usage of art form, they have to be cost effective. And you have to think about the commercialization of that. And one of the challenges of now is that there is no settling of commercialization. We don't have those long periods where we can settle these technologies in to create a sustainable commercial model. The technologies are coming through so quickly. They are disrupting so quickly. It's like something new is coming in before any technology is stabilized. And that's a big challenge, I think, for us in the R&D space, is the hypothesis that we want could take us the next 10, 15 years, but we may not have the luxury of the next 10, 15 years because things are changing so rapidly in this market. So a question for us as makers is, how do we create meaning? How do we create depth? How do we look at the unintended consequences of some of these technologies? How do we sit in the trouble of that? How do we sit comfortably in that? And also, when we're looking at genuine disruption of models post-pandemic, how do we make sure that we imagine ourselves out of it and not just apply a solution that actually won't expand our business models? It just plugs a hole in that financial year and doesn't give us those long-term results. So we've got to look at a more heterogeneous approach to research and development rather than a homogenized one. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There won't be one solution to the problems of this. And ultimately, it will probably be a beautiful artistic human that puts an idea out in the world and gets us to think. It could be that film where you go, do you remember that film? And people go, oh my God, that really hit us in that moment and the timeliness of that. So as much as we're looking at these technologies, it's the content, it's the storytelling that really holds the audience's imagination. And The Tempest is Shakespeare's last play, arguably one of his most innovative. And in that, it's a story about forgiveness. It's a story about family. It's a story about reconciliation. And it's a story about putting things right. And it's a story about otherness. It's about representation. It's about being trapped and finding ways out. And these are the collective stories that Shakespeare keeps reminding us about, and why the reinterpretation of these stories is so interesting. Because actually, if you really wanted to look at AI right now, you take all of those interpretations of those plays over the last 400 years, and that would tell you something. That long-term data set that you have around those plays and the interpretation of that would give us patterns. And when we start, I keep coming back to it, when we start looking at patterns, then we can get meaning. Then it moves from anecdotal information and we can start learning. And that's a useful look at AI and those tools that we have available to us at speed. But what's interesting is, what do we archive? How do we archive it? Who's archiving? Whose voice now has a greater possibility of encompassing such a wide range of people. But if you look at the past, it was probably one view, one lens of that content. So let me share with you this shiny video for you to get a sense of what we brought onto our stage. We did a Snapchat filter for this play using the creative assets of Ariel, the digital avatar. And in one day only, we reached 7.5 million people. Again, another statistic reminding us we can have a moment together in real time. With this number of people, we can reach millions of people thinking about that convergence, thinking about that connection, thinking about shared co-presence.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Tempest Company, this is your part one beginner's course.
3 years ago, we spotted that 2016 was going to be a big Shakespeare year. It was Shakespeare's 400th anniversary of his death, and the Royal Shakespeare Company needed to put on something pretty spectacular. We needed to try and match the magic of Shakespeare's imagination.
I got cast a long time ago for this new production of The Tempest, and the RSC is the home of Shakespeare. Not many actors get the chance to do things like this.
It's taken the best part of 2 years for us to develop this technology with Intel and create an avatar to make Ariel fly, to create a sense of the island being a place where magic was possible.
I boarded the King's ship. You get to see two fully fledged performances, one of which is an actor and another is this apparition can fly around the space.
To dive into the fire, to ride.
We have unlimited versions of Ariel. We're able to change his form in many different ways.
We are creating for the first time on stage, real-time, live facial performance capture, and that is quite an extraordinary leap forward.
I and my fellows are ministers of fate.
The actor both becomes the marionette and the puppeteer at the same time, and you can see their physicality completely driving one-to-one this digital character.
Men hang and drown.
We keep working, keep trying to refine the way that Ariel moves, the way he talks, and I have no idea where it's going to go.
The technology that Intel deployed here for the Tempest is big. Take real-time information from a motion capture suit, map that onto a complex digital avatar, and then project that digital avatar out through 27 projectors.
We have their desktop i7s to take Mark's skeletal information and a machine called the Big Beast, which has 120 cores.
I've never seen a technical setup like this. This place is full of huge amounts of technology, much more so than most film sets that we're on. Generally, on set, you might say, let's fix that in post. You can't do that here. The avatar has to be so robust because that's the final product.
All you can do is create the play with the tools that you have now. And what's delightful about this production is that we have pretty spectacular tools.
What the technology affords us is the ability to encapsulate Shakespeare's vision, inclusive of all that magic, that wonder.
The possibilities of what Intel have allowed are only limited by our imaginations.
We're at the forefront of something that other people can take on and build. Who knows where things will be taken in the future?
It's for other creative minds to see what we're doing and take it further.
That show took from 2013 to 2016 to make, and in that did have AI. It had an AI that the face of Ariel, the digital avatar, moved its facial expressions randomly to give it a more human element, which I always found. We just quietly put it in, and I was thinking for this talk, would we have, if we added that in now, in this cultural moment, would we have been able to do that without a deep level of interrogation and questioning around that? Because these topics have become so disruptive, because these technologies are now coming in a very real way. But back in 2016, we were just like, oh, we'll just put a little bit of that in. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, I'm really curious of how our relationships has changed with some of these technologies just over this short amount of time. But also in that, we were bringing new technologies into the theatre making toolkit. And one of the things I think this work shows you is the expansion of the tools and technologies available to artists now is growing exponentially, what they want to do and how they want to do it. But if that hadn't have been right for the storytelling, if it hadn't have been authentic, we would have cut it. Because in theatre, you can create the gaps, you can fill in the gaps, it doesn't need to be there if it doesn't move the story forward. And I think in that sense of liveness, we can be in the moment. It's an ephemeral, it can go. It's different to film and cinema, which needs a photorealism to it that's been set up in that way of a very close camera shot. We've got perspective to play with. We've got lights to play with. Candlelight was a technology in theatre. Electricity has been a technology in theatre. They're now tools. So really what's interesting is motion capture is still with us. Is it going to be a useful technology to us in 50 years' time? I don't know. It's really interesting to see the technologies that have stayed with us, again, over hundreds of years in this art form. You may think in the moment, this is the technology that's going to drive it forward, but actually it could be other technologies that just aren't getting that oxygen in that moment around innovation. And I think you're always competing against an actor saying those lines with meaning. And the best technology that we have is the performer and their compellingness and their ability to connect. This is an art form that has to connect, has to find meaning. And in The Tempest, that's what the challenge was. That's what the relationship was. When Simon Russell Beale was performing with the avatar and performing with Mark, there had to be logic and rules around that technology being present, because actually the disruption is ritual. And actually the rituals that we have in our everyday culture and where do these technologies come in and how do we form relationships with them. So we went from the stage to our home, and we started to look at how could we create moments of connection without being there. And for audiences at home, we looked at mixed reality headsets where you could see the world, not just be in a VR headset where you just saw your world or the virtual world. And again, this is using lots of visual effects, making in gaming technology, Unreal technology, all tools that are coming into play, expanding the theatre making toolkit all the time. The usefulness of these technologies that I can see keep coming back to us are game engine technology is allowing us to map 3D spaces all the time, and theatre's always worked in 3D. So that has a usefulness to us. The AI in this context, if we think about patterns and actors moving in the same pattern every night, thinking about follow spots, thinking about lighting, thinking about sound, there is clear usefulness in the mapping of that technology and the accuracy of that and moving that on. And I think that those aspects will grow. What we haven't seen is an adoption so much of headsets. People like to be part and see what they're part of in the environment. And that will be an interesting one to see how that disruptive technology lands and grows, and whether we'll see an increase in home consumer devices. We haven't yet seen that, and that's quite interesting. And when we did Dream, which I'll come on to, we are still seeing a huge inequity in people's homes. So as much as you see these developments, actually, you have the danger of creating a disparity between those who have and those who haven't. And if we think about democratizing, the printing press was a technology. It became democratizing when it incentivized people to learn, but when it moved from printing in Latin to English or Spanish or languages that more people spoke and understood. So there's something here again to remind us of what are the mistakes that we've learned in previous industrial revolutions and how can we learn from them? And most of the learnings come from a homogenized approach to thought, rather than including a diverse range of people from a diverse range of backgrounds to look at those problems. In this particular moment, when we looked at this 7 Ages of Man performance, and it was one of the first volumetric captures of an actor, we were told it didn't capture, it didn't capture black skin effectively very well. And we went, well, you better make that work then. It wasn't that you just go, oh, we'll just program an actor where the color will, no. You work with that technology company and go, no, we will look at all ranges of skin color for this. That is not a democratic technology. And the same happened with lighting and film. So if we have only a small amount of people looking at the innovation of these technologies, we miss something. And that's really important around the design, around the accessibility, around the inclusion of these technologies. And again, I'll keep coming back to AI. It's like the more people you have in the room thinking about this, then you find what are the uses of this that are beyond just how can I make the world more efficient? How can I make it go faster? Oh, we can't do that yet, but you could now. Do you see what I mean? It's like, how do we think more creatively? And I keep going back to, if you put artists and engineers together, you're going to get a different set of outcomes. If you put a range of artists in, a range of people from different backgrounds, you're going to get a different set of questions. And you're going to get questions that a smaller group of people will never have imagined of. And that's a really important aspect, again, of making theatre accessible. So this was 7 Ages of Man. You'll see very simple performance. It's meant to be performed on your table. You're meant to have a headset. You can walk around it. You can be part of it. And this was about R&D going, how can we create experiences that aren't just on a mediated screen, that actually you can be much more connected to. And one of the learnings that we had from this is around performance technique. You'll find in immersive, it's not a pure translation You don't perform in the same way. An actor won't perform in the same way in a stage as they do on film and television. And in immersive technologies, we found that you had to perform your voice as if for film, but you still had to perform your body as if for stage. So you had to have grand gestures with your body and physicality. But if you were over-performing your voice, it was deeply intrusive and disruptive when it was such an intimate performance. That's really crucial when we're thinking about the future of performance, on how we perform and how we need to shift our performance to the form that we're working in. So this very beautiful 7 Ages of Man.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, fueling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden, quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. Then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Son's teeth, son's eyes, son's taste, son's everything.
I don't know if you noticed, it was really important to the actor who am I talking to when he was being filmed? Where is my audience? And he made a decision that it would be like first stage of the circle. That's how they made the decision. But what we start to see in the future of performance is your body is now a technology, the embodiment of a human as a form of technology, and also connection, and what are those connection points? And the eyes keep coming back to something that we find really hard in real, like any digital avatar, is to get those connections. If you go back to Ariel and how we used an AI to be really random to try and get that sense, we look at a continued challenge for technologists is we're not touching that human to human connection. It wasn't there yet. And it's really interesting to now start to go, oh, hang on a minute, let's place the analog human in that and now start playing with the technologies we have. So looking at motion capture around physicality, looking at these technologies slightly like back at you, throwing the ball back to the technologists and going, well, let's have a play here. Let's not just get this more realistic sense of I want an actor and I want it to be really human. In The Tempest, we really played with the fact that you won't see it, but Ariel has no feet. And that was a deliberate design decision, because gravity is a really hard thing to pull off in virtual worlds and gaming. And most people that are taught programming or game engine technology are trying to get the physics of it. And actually we like turn off physics, turn off gravity, and suddenly we made that character more believable. And that's why I keep coming back to the future of these technologies is not to accept them as they are, as is, as it comes out of the tin. The future of this technology is to challenge it and have a confidence in the craft and in the possibilities of imagination that you have to work with those technologies. And that's where we've seen the success points in this. Where it fails is where that technology gets wheeled in, showcased as spectacle, and walks out again. And that's why the R&D frameworks are so important, giving space for that. And again, I go back to, if these technologies are moving so quickly as solutions, we don't sit with the uncertainty, we're going to miss stuff, and that's a shame. So the future is really about enjoying the question, and that's what great writing does too. So I'm going to show you 2 more videos, if that's all right. It's the darkness. I hope you're still with me and haven't nodded off. And I hope, like for those at home, you've got another cup of tea or something or whatever, and a biscuit this time. And some of this is sharing with you. I hope you see, even over 10 years, you're seeing patterns. And it's those patterns that we keep needing to read, because once we start reading those patterns, we're not starting things from afresh. Nothing comes from a vacuum. Nothing comes from nowhere. It's a response to something, whether that's social, whether that's political, whether that's thematic, whether that's a same technology being used in different ways. And again, I'll start with that connection of virtualness, that acceptance that a generation now can be co-present with anyone in the world. Friendships are formed where you may never meet that person, but they are deep, meaningful friendships. Content is shared, content is created. We have a permission, as any of us that can create content now. There are platforms where you can publish. You don't need to have a purveyor of taste. You don't need to be programmed. You have an agency. There are algorithms that can help you find more audiences. There are systems that can allow you to monetize. The printing press, the language of that printing press now in terms of the internet, the currency of that is your knowledge and understanding of those technologies and what's possible. Is knowing that you have those technologies on your phone, on your iPads, on your laptops. And sometimes we get caught up with such complex technology that actually we don't support the technologies that are much more simple, that have much wider reach, that can potentially have much more impact. And it's in that moment that when you face the constraint of a pandemic, you have to really innovate your way out of it. And that's what happened to us in 2020 and how we looked at Dream. Dream was a project funded by UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, Audience of the Future. And we were due to do a performance in a shopping centre in Stratford using projection mapping, a lot of the technologies that you saw in The Tempest, a big convergence of them, making it much more world building. And then a pandemic hit and we couldn't even make any theatre. And that's where I go to. 10 years ago, I was quite confident of these patterns and these next steps. And then what you do is you forget that a real world comes in, and the real world isn't like that. It's messy, it's volatile. We're not just moving forward. Society doesn't just move forward and progress. It pendulum swings back and forth. It's tectonic plates. It's joyously messy. It's unpredictable, yet predictable. It's full of contradiction. And so when I say I'm less certain, it doesn't mean I'm not excited. It doesn't mean that I'm not hopeful. It doesn't mean I don't think any of these things aren't possible, because I know through doing work in a pandemic, I know that all of these things are possible. What's interesting to me is I think as we've come out of a pandemic and we're now living with the true disruption of some of these massive technologies and are in the middle of the next phase of this digital age, what I feel more confident about than ever is the power of story, the power of creativity and the possibility of that, and also that actually the answers aren't necessarily for us in that present tense, but maybe the generation coming through, making sure that we've got real connection with that generation coming through about how content is made and what we're doing. So this video gives you a bit behind the scenes, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but what I will say is, made in the pandemic, we did a massive pivot on this project, and 3 pieces of information came back to us when we asked audiences where they were at. They were craving togetherness, they were craving liveness, and there's a huge digital inequity in people's homes. And those are the 3 things that we had to overcome. I don't think it will ever change that people crave liveness. I don't think it will ever change that people will crave togetherness. I think it could change that we can change that inequity in people's homes. And I think that with this, when we look at the future of theatre, if we hold those attributes, togetherness and liveness have been in this art form for thousands of years. And that's a really strong starting point for any R&D that we're thinking about. So let's give this video a whirl and you can see it.
Follow me. This project is a sort of amazing hybrid of gaming technology, orchestral music, and theatre.
The project is a huge collaboration involving lots of different specialisms focused on performance using technology.
It's really about us seeing whether we can present the world of A Midsummer Night's Dream to an audience and allow them to interact in that world live without leaving their homes.
Shall we have some mischief here?
There is a multitude of technology being used on this project.
The advancement of technology, both in hardware and software, has allowed us really to do things that just weren't possible in the past. Live mocap is a very new thing. It means there's more fluidity and more opportunity for creative expression.
So it's really working with the actors to find their physical embodiment of the characters. What reads well in live performance doesn't necessarily read well on the avatar's body.
We are able to take the movements of the actors in the motion capture with an amazing piece of software called Gestument, and this allows the actors to play digital instruments with their movement.
Central to the show is a huge, earth-shattering, tumultuous storm. It's a very good metaphor for what we've all been through. In the last year, we've all experienced things being taken away from us, things that we love, things that we delight in.
We were at the point where we were imagining that we would produce a digital experience that would be visitor-based and be attended. And then, of course, COVID hit. We were really fortunate in the fact that actually 3 days before we were forced to halt everything was that we had recorded the music.
didn't realise this at the time, but this was the last moment we'd be there collectively with such a huge group of people for a really long time. And then the Monday after the lockdown happened, that was when we stopped production. But we had this music.
We are going to take you out of your homes and into a forest tonight. It is beautiful and slightly unpredictable.
We're not going to have that audience in person, but actually now is the time to absolutely embrace that remote audience, that digital audience.
We're ready. Now, as soon as we get in there, you will see me become Puck. Wish me luck.
You feel like you've been in a large group, experiencing together a story and a journey. I think that's what we've been missing so much over the last year.
I'd really love audiences to feel like they've experienced something genuinely different and illuminating, and also celebrate the research and development and the experimentation and the risk of what this piece is.
Constraint brought out something way more than we ever anticipated, and constraint is not a bad thing. Sometimes if you don't have any constraint, you can get lost, and actually that friction with the world, that friction with what you can and can't do is great in terms of finding ways through. There's just one little personal story I wanted to share, because my son's in the audience today, and he's my toughest critic, but my dad was also alive at the time, and they both watched it together, and I wanted us to just think about this generation gap we have now and how real it is, and the future of live performance is about how we can bring those audiences together. On the Tempest, we brought young people in through that technology. Their favourite scene was the drinking scene with Stefano and Trinculo. There is no technology in that scene. It's just jokes and Shakespeare jokes. They walked out with the Shakespeare. We brought an older generation in through the Shakespeare. They walked out with the wonder of technology. In this piece, there's an interactive component. You have to light Puck's way. You have to flick a firefly into the forest. And like Dylan's generation, that younger generation didn't have any question around the use of their technology. They're swiping on screens. They don't need to be taught that. My dad was taught it and thought he actually aimed for Puck and thought he killed Puck, because he's a golfer and actually quite accurate. But more my point was, there's this wonderful playful interactive moment in that play and brought togetherness. And actually theatre has changed its setup and its makeup due to political, and we've become really prim and proper. What you don't realise is that in Shakespeare's day, business was being done. People were talking throughout the show. It was like the whole afternoon. You'd stay there in the evening. People would drink. People would socialise. And then you get later, we're not allowed to even cough. We're not allowed to turn on our mobile phones. We've got really restricted in our behaviours. If we look at the future of performance and these convergent technologies, it's not just to present, it's about to bring it together, and thinking about audience agency, thinking about the rituals, thinking about what you can and can't do, what technologies can enable that are really important. But how you make people feel is ultimately what this art form in real time can massively do. There's an anecdote. I used to work in a classical music store. I studied classical music at university. My weekend job was working in a CD shop. That gives you an antiquated look at technology. It was the 90s. And this really furious customer came in once, and he put the CD down. He went, "I want my money back." And we were like, "Okay, I want my money back. This CD is not right." And we were like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? Like, you have to give us a bit more." And it was a live recording of a performance, like 1960, whatever. And he went, "This is not the recording that you say it is." And we were like, "Okay." And And we were looking it up, and, you know, we were looking at all the back catalogue information, and it's like, I think it is. I think it's the actual recording of that day, and blah, blah, blah. He went, no, it isn't, because at the end of Act 2, I coughed, and there's no cough on that recording. He was part of it. He was part of that experience, and that technology captured that experience. But for him, not authentically. His cough was part of that performance. Today, this talk is this talk. Tomorrow, it could be a completely different one. Yesterday, it would have been, my throat was awful. My point is in that moment, it's in that real-time moment now that this art form is so exciting. The jeopardy, the connection, the presence. And I think something about the future of performance we need to think about. Often we're innovating with the construct, the manufacturing system of it, the production of it. Well, let's think about the audience. They're integral. Let's think about the R&D of that and the ritual and the aspects of that when we're thinking about the future of performance. Because ultimately, our consumer behaviours are changing. How we consume content is changing. How we look at experiences is changing. And within that, the way that we are here today will change. The way we're here together virtually and in person has changed. Even in the last couple of years, this would have been, you know, different. We wouldn't have expected audiences at home. You make your cultural habits differently now. I can watch it at home. That's easier for me. So the effort to be here is greater in some ways. Yet also the effort to be here could have been inaccessible. It might be easier to see at home because you can be in the environment that's right for you. Those things have shifted. And so these are all things to think about when we look at accessible technology, but also not getting too caught up always on the making of the content, but actually what we got to think about is the making of the experience in its totality, and thinking about all the tools that are available for us to do that. So finally, I wanted to just share with you how we, in that moment of the pandemic, had all our buildings shut, but actually it was an amazing opportunity to then scan them with a LiDAR scan and create a virtual environment. And you'll see now in the final, this video might work, it might not work actually. Will it work? Here we go. This is all made in Unreal. There we go. Just to leave on the note that the future is all right. I'm not as scared as you might think. But I am genuinely excited by the possibility that we could have an audience that could potentially have agency in this moment and the moment that we might be together, and actually that the 20th century was about broadcast. The 20th century was like, this is the event that you can't get to, therefore here is a version of that. What I'd like us to think about in terms of the future of live performance and these emergent technologies, whether that's AI, whether that's motion capture, whether that's a new skill, whether that's actually a piece of paper and a pen in that toolkit that we have, that there will be a real care in what happens in a live moment when we're all together. And if we know that the world, when it was shut down, two of the most important things were craving togetherness and liveness, if that's the R&D question that we need to think about, how we think about that as holistically and how we think about that as inclusively as possible, but step away from broadcasting something out and maybe starting at how do we bring something in, and the possibilities of converging 30 million or 1,000 people together at the same time, having an experience that meets their needs in their way, I think is truly exciting. So the future of theatre is theatre itself and all the things that it's done for the last 1,000 years. I think we're in good shape. I think that's it. Thank you.
So we're just going to swap the laptops over, and John is kind enough to take that over because I might make them explode.
What's the question before you do that?
I organized this series because I know nothing about AI, so I got people in who do, and people who know tech. So first of all, Sarah, thank you. I especially like the part where you're pointing out around the don't just take the technology as it comes in a tin, but make it our own and actually work with it and make it work for us. I thought that was excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will just quickly, you have to bear with me if possible for a couple of minutes, just to kind of talk you through, for people who've been here before, to talk you through what the series has been so far. So this is our 5th event. These were the first 3 events, and the barcodes, which will be in the recordings as well, are for you to watch them if you want. So we also will record Sarah's, we recorded the session and make it available on YouTube for everyone to watch. So if you missed something or you want to see something else, they will be there. And that also means there's only one more event to go. Our final event will be a panel discussion. And this is the current panel. And it's a mix around AI, environment, and social good ? And we will dive into more the environmental impact AI technology might have on the world, but also how it can be used for social good potentially. So if you are available and you're still not bored of AI talks, please join us. It should be also a hybrid event. I say should because technology might fault us, but we'll see. And here's the barcode for that final event. One last time, as promised, I will show you guys the QR code for this event in case you haven't managed to sign up yet. And I will pass over to John, who will wrap up the session. But thank you all for joining us today. It's absolutely amazing to have so many excited people in the room. So thank you for that. To John.
I guess before I wrap up, I just wanted to give anyone an opportunity if anyone wants to ask Sarah any quick questions.
I'm sorry it wasn't that technical. I hope that was all right.
Mary.
What's next? Oh, I couldn't possibly say. But my colleague James is in the room leading something really special.
It's a little flute.
I would say we're going to put something in a place which is unexpected for us as a stage, and we're working with a beautiful company that will adapt one of those plays in quite, in a way that matters to this generation now. And will hopefully, what I'd hope is that we start out there and create a world and connect with a community in another place, and then it might pique an interest for them to come and see a piece of theatre. So we're connecting with a massive community that I think, we're looking at a particular play in a different format. it's quite far for us. But James is leading on that with a beautiful studio based in Brooklyn on that, a design studio.
Can you say how AI is going to fit into that?
I mean, yeah, it'll be in a game. So we'll have an element of AI, several elements of AI. And in the making of that too, potentially, it will have AI in the production of it too, potentially. It won't have AI in the creation of the text though. We're not there. We're not making a chat GPT text.
And when can we see it?
Oh gosh, we want to know when we can see it. We're currently, the artists are in there. Hopefully in the next 18 months to 2 years.
One from Heather there.
Just a quick one. What's been your biggest wow moment in the last sort of 10 years?
Oh gosh.
The thing that's been that just like you've just thought, that's amazing.
Oh man, that's really difficult. Not in a difficult light. There's been none. There's been loads. I find that the oh wow moments are often, again, it's that jeopardy. When we put all the technology in the theatre for the Tempest, we turned it on, none of it worked. And that was an oh wow moment in a different way, but it reminded you that the technology needs to settle and it needs, you don't just put things together and it works. But I think the oh wow moment in that particular production was, there were people that had worked at the RSC for like 30 years and they sat and just watched the tech, knowing that new technology was happening. They remembered, they were like, this is the time when the gobo came in, and they remembered moments for them as practitioners of new technologies coming in that they knew was special. And I loved that actually, that the actual craft people, the quiet innovators, the costume makers, they're all innovators of craft, and they sat with that. And then on Dream, we didn't know it was going to work. And the wow moment for us then is we had this ticker where you knew how many audiences were coming in. But we just saw like it was like 100, 200, and it started getting to the thousands. And then you started seeing these tweets, which is like, oh, I'm part of the wow moment of actually that audience coming together in that excitement that you have when you enter a space in real life. They were having that experience online with each other. And that was a real wow moment when you knew there were people there in their homes, wherever they were, excited to be part of something. You don't ever lose that adrenaline hit, actually.
I don't suppose, Nadine, is it possible to see any of the online questions on the screen? Because I tried to join on my phone and I've joined the wrong link to see the questions. 2 questions.
In your email.
In my email, perfect. Brilliant. I don't know if, Gavin, you had a question while I bring up my email to
don't be mean.
To ask you the one.
I'm just curious about it's sort of a speculative question, Sarah. So one of the interesting things you said is about how performers have to change how they project and how they act to suit the medium. Now, the last video you showed a beautiful digital twin of your premises, and so it makes us think, well, maybe the next step in the future is to think about full digital twins of actual live performances that are happening in real time.
Funny that.
But I'm wondering, do you have any sort of insight into how performers might handle such sort of hybrid events where you have something happening in the real world and something happening in the digital world?
Oh, completely. Again, James, who's here with me, we've done a lot of R&D together on the performer and working in the live and virtual. And Maggie, one of the performers in Dream, was performing an eyeball, which is quite, do you know what I mean? And like using motion capture and things like that. So, and I know David's been working on a lot of this live and virtual, how it affects a performer. There's a huge amount more R&D to do because it's not a like for like. The motion capture technology can allow your physicality to do anything. If you program your 5 fingers, that can be like a puppeteer type thing as well. So it's really like a 3D chess set at the moment in terms of performance style and technique. I think that's fair to say. I would say that's a very rich thread to look at, because I think then it affects how you teach performance at school, how you teach performance at university, how you train as a practitioner. And I think some of the problems in work, immersive work that's come out to date has been for that reason. We haven't got a codification of some of that performance. So you're like, oh my God, it feels really intense in my head. Well, yeah, of course, because you've got it dialed up to 100 in terms of, we've got to get the nuance of that better. And I think that the films like Talkies and all of that in the early days did exactly the same thing. And then suddenly you get these decades of like the 80s or 90s, and you see these screenshots and these ways that people are editing and directing shifts. It's craft. That's what it is. Yeah.
I'll give you an online question.
Oh no, I'm just apologising for the lack of technical.
So Luis Enrique Almeida de Oliveira asks, I'm fascinated by the creative response call the RSC promoted a few years ago. The opportunity for audiences to leave a trail in the performance, touch it somehow, is a beautiful way of integrating story performer audiences. What other shapes and ways have you found to allow audience interference in the process? What do audiences play in these futures you share? And thank you for your talk, this insightful talk this afternoon.
Thank you. Gosh, I mean, I think audiences have huge agency. I mean, you can walk out and that's a form of your agency. I mean, audiences do. If you look at that at the very most basic level, I think culturally we've become really restrictive around our cultural habits, and maybe haven't realised how can we give people a really visceral, intense experience that has focus, but also maybe not be so stifled in that constraint. You do get very real questions around like paper cups versus like noise. Noise is a massive thing in the live performance space because you had that door open there. It's like on cue. We're so alert. Our senses are so heightened when we're experiencing something together. I mean, we let people turn their mobile phones on in Dream. There's a different playfulness that comes through that. They're like, oh, am I to? You're like, yeah. And you turn it on and suddenly they engage in a different way. So I think it doesn't mean it's for everything, and you've got to look at it through the lens of what you want that experience to be and how you want people to feel. I don't think it's a matter of going, right, everyone, just chill out and eat loads of noisy crisps. But remember what you want people to feel in that. And I don't think we have a game plan on that. I think it's very like, what we do want though is whoever you are, wherever you come from, for you to feel comfortable in that space. And that isn't always designed in traditional theatre spaces in that way.
I think we'll finish the questions on that very inspiring point. And we'll be heading downstairs in a minute to have some drinks. But before that, I'll say a last couple of slides to you all. But first, I'd like to ask us all just to thank Sarah for such an amazing and inspiring talk. I won't keep you from the drinks for too long, but I just want to make a couple of notices. Firstly, to say please do fill out the survey on the QR code to provide your feedback about the talk. And then just before I finish, before we go downstairs, I just want to say a couple of words about CoSTAR LiveLAB, which is the organisation that's kind of hosted this talk today. So for those of you who've not heard of us, CoSTAR is a new £75 million national network that's been set up by the government with government funding to support R&D, world-class R&D in the UK in the future of convergent media. So we're spanning the country. There's a national lab down in London at Pinewood that's going to be doing underpinning research right across the convergent screen technology sector. We have a Foresight lab in Goldsmiths, also in London, that's going to be looking at future industry trends. We have a screen lab in Ulster that's going to be looking at the coming together of digital technology with film and television. A real-time lab up in Abertay looking at games, and here across the University of York, but also Production Park over in Wakefield, which is our main partner. We are going to be exploring the future of live experiences. So we're going to be doing this, us as the network, over the next 6 years by putting together some really amazing facilities to allow companies, organisations, researchers, artists to work with cutting-edge future technologies, but also surrounding that in the expertise to help people work with that. And then on top of that, putting together access initiatives to allow people actually to get access to those things. Before we finish up, I just want to show you what I mean by that. We've got a little video that was made, if I can find the play button, that was made for an event a while back. So I just want to show you that before we finish up.
The CoSTAR LiveLAB will redefine the future of live performance. It combines University of York expertise with industry leaders from the creative sector.
Together, we will create immersive, multisensory and interactive technologies. Our lab is located at Production Park, Europe's largest campus of companies dedicated to innovation and live performance.
In the coming year, we will build new experimental virtual production spaces dedicated to live performance and immersive user experience, all supported by Vodafone's expertise in cutting-edge networking technologies.
And with Screen Yorkshire, Wakefield Council, and York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, we're going to launch our Access programme.
We will incubate startups, train future technologists, and empower diverse voices and new talent across the sector.
The CoSTAR LiveLAB will be shaped by you. Whether you're an SME, a creative practitioner, a production company, or a live venue, share your challenges and help us secure a rewarding and sustainable future for the creative industries in the north of England and the UK.
If you want to find out more about what that means, there's a few of us around downstairs afterwards, and we'll be happy to have a chat to you. And with that, I guess I want to say thank you to a whole range of people who've made this event happen. I won't read all their names out, but loads of people, all the wonderful people up there who have made this happen, especially Nadine putting on this event and the rest of the series. So, and now we can all head downstairs and have a bit of a drink together and some snacks.